Even when discussing a simple Jew, no person's life can be summed up in a series of speeches. There's an old Jewish joke, Achrei Mos Kedoshim Emer. After a person's death, they suddenly say he was holy. I used to think it was a cynical joke, and then I realized it's a sobering fact. We sadly only start to truly appreciate a person's goodness after he passes. Even more, whatever we think we appreciate about any person's goodness is only a drop in the sea of what he means to Hashem. Only Hashem knows the true value of a person and his accomplishments and the ripple effects of his actions. With Sava, this is both true and false. Even when he was alive, we knew who he was. We knew he was a great man. We knew he was a Talmid Chacham of the greatest stature. We knew of his tzidkus, yiras shamayim, and love of God's Torah. Some people knew of his greatness in Psak, and we knew what they knew, and we often knew how little they knew at the same time. But we as family and Talmidim, we at least knew that no one knew. And when we're thinking of stories and searching for what we remember, we also realize how little we knew him, even those of us who were very close to him. How much more there was to know, how I could have asked him this, or I should have talked to him about that. The truth is, many of us tried, but one of Sava's special qualities was that he was quiet and humble and didn't like to be in the spotlight. I didn't even know about some gedolim that he was close with or great things that he did. He was so modest and focused on his responsibility as an Eved Hashem that these things weren't even peripherally important. Growing up, people would ask me about Sava and what it's like to grow up with a grandfather who's such a giant. They would often say, well, to you he's probably just a grandfather. And though that dynamic might exist with certain great people and their grandchildren, with Sava that statement doesn't really resonate. Yes, he was a loving grandfather, but he was never just a grandfather. Even as little kids, we were in awe of him. And when he walked into the room, the dynamic always changed and reflected that. On that note, I think one good way to gauge what a person adds to this world is by remembering what you felt when you walked into the room. Past few weeks, I tried to picture what happened when Sava walked into the room. It's been a while since he was lucid, and what that felt like. One thing was that with Sava, there was such a sense of clarity and confidence and purpose in his presence. We just knew what to do. Keep Hashem's Torah. It's not complicated, it's simple. Torah is sweet and simple. Judaism is the deepest and most important part of every conversation, every decision, every aspect of our lives. There was something so extreme and so beautiful about that implicit message that he carried around all day and night. And there was definitely an intensity and seriousness to that message. In point of fact, I remember once asking Sava if I could read a kosher novel without any ethical lessons, like fiction, just to relax. I had been looking at Encyclopedia Talmudis on their entry on Leitzanus, and I saw it was Machlokes Achronim if you could read novels. So I asked Sava if his mutter. So he said, why are you reading it? I said, I don't know, let's say to relax before I go to sleep at night. See, he points to the shelf, he goes, look, the Shem HaGedolim L'Achidah. You can read Shem HaGedolim, it's full of interesting stories and facts. It's a great read. So then he thought about it. I don't see any heter. He definitely had that intensity, which was simply the manifestation of an uncompromising commitment to halacha. But he also had such a lightness and such a sense of humor. Always a sharp line, always a joke, always a good spirit. His laugh said so much and was so contagious that if you weren't laughing along with him, you were at least smiling. I think his jokes and his laugh would often serve as a reminder to me about the joy there is to life, to Yiddishkeit, and to halacha. So although life is serious, and Torah is serious, and there's nothing in the world more serious than that, at the same time there's such a playfulness to life. And it's okay, no, even better, it's ideal to walk around smiling and to not take everything so seriously. And even if you've been through years and years of suffering, and Sava definitely had his share of Yisurim, you can approach every day with a smile. Speaking of Yisurim, I'd like to share another story. About 12 years ago, I was going through a very difficult period in my life. At that point, I was good about calling Sava and Savta every Erev Shabbos. My conversations with Sava were usually brief. He'd often ask me what I was learning. I'd sometimes ask a shayla. Sometimes he'd tell me, oh, it's good you call for shaylas, then we get to speak. We'd say Good Shabbos and that was it. One time around that period, Sava told me out of nowhere, I think you should learn Eov. I said, okay. I didn't really know what to respond. I didn't know where he was coming from. But looking back, it was obvious. To Sava, the answer to everything was in the Torah. Hafachba v'hafachba dekulaba. To him, when you go through suffering, you don't run to a therapist, you don't join a support group. Maybe you do those too, I don't know. But you learn Eov. The primacy of Limud Torah, not just Limud Torah, but that the Torah contains all the answers to all of life's questions and problems and challenges, that was an idea that Sava embodied to the nth degree. And that was something he imparted to us with his attitude toward life, and even many of his psukim are founded upon this philosophy. My father rightfully cautioned us not to say Hesped, but to formulate a speech that represents a celebration of Sava's life. I fear this is too close to a eulogy, and I think if Sava was here, and perhaps his neshama is indeed here, I don't know, but if he was here, he would probably be saying the same. Don't cry, just keep the Torah, laugh, make jokes, live life to its fullest, be normal. That was a big one by him. Do Shnai and Mikra, keep Arba Chalki Shulchan Aruch, don't get complicated, don't get nervous. Don't forget about the essential aspects of Judaism and prioritize the less essential. One final point. Since a young age, I've always been a thinker and I've always been into Musar, Hashkafa, and Jewish philosophy. People would ask me if Sava's into these things too. He gave me a lot of time to talking about it. And I would answer that it seems that the Gemara and Halacha is his main focus, but since he knows everything, he's of course learned, Chavis Lavaves and other Svarim as well. The truth is, it's much more than that. I once asked him about the Gra in Mishlei, who implies that Tikkun Amidus is the purpose in life. And he said with such a sense of conviction, of course, it's not just the Gra, it's the Rambam. And over the years I realized that although he spent all of his day learning Shas and poskim, he was really in the truest sense about Musar also. He didn't learn Torah all day to make a name for himself, but he did it because it was God's Torah, and because Torah is the surest way to elevate man. If we want to celebrate Sava's life, let's celebrate it by committing ourselves to the Torah more, each in our own way, by remembering that this document was given to us over 3,000 years ago by God at Har Sinai, with its rich Torah Shebal Peh, and by holding on to it as tightly and as tenaciously as we can. Yhi Zichrei Baruch.